Members of the public have been so conned by the alleged authorities for their entire lives can be too painful to contemplate. And those with neither eyes to see nor ears to hear may want to stage an argument. Many suggested they were aware, yet upon further discussion they admitted to not really knowing. Our mind is of three categories: what we know, what we don't know, and what we don't know we don't know. And not knowing is unfortunate, and not knowing that we don't know is tragic. W.E.R.T. I hail from a minority group of those famous for artifacts depicting gods and kings. And long ago, in ancient city of Ile-Ife in Midwest Nigeria, Olorun, the sky god, the supreme god, lowered a great chain from the heavens to the ancient waters. Down this chain climbed my direct ancestor Oduduwa, Olorun's son. Oduduwa brought with him a handful of dirt, a special 5-toed chicken, and a palm nut. He threw the dirt upon the ancient waters and set the chicken on the dirt. The chicken busily scratched and scattered the dirt until it formed the first dry earth. In the center of this new world, Oduduwa created a magnificent Ife kingdom. He planted the palm nuts, which grew into a proud tree with 16 branches, symbolizing the 16 sons and grandsons of Oduduwa. Oduduwa was the first ruler of the kingdom and the father of all Yoruba. Over time, he crowned his 16 sons and grandsons and sent them off to establish their great own Yoruba kingdoms. As descendants of the sky god, these first Yoruba rulers and their direct descendants were divine kings. Only they could wear special veiled crowns that symbolizes their sacred power. Now, don't remain part of the problem by refusing to become part of the solution. The ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about and refuse to investigate. Dr. Wayne Dye. Unfortunately, only a few want to hear how to become free. Stop identifying with their false beliefs. Do what they want to do instead of working for a living and live in joy, which is what we are designed to do. Most want security over freedom. As most people identify with their beliefs, giving them up would present the fear. Who would I be, they ask, if they were to open their minds, drop their preconceived notions and their psychological prejudices, let go of the concepts that their beliefs are who they are, they might become enlightened. Millions of unconscious people are not taking responsibility for their inner peace. Eckhart Tolle. Now, needless to say, suggesting we have been conned into playing an insidious game, which is destroying our lives, our futures, our fellowship, our spirituality, and our true natures, will meet with non-receptive minds. In Buddha's word, I have discovered a profound truth, difficult to perceive, difficult to understand, accessible only to the wise. Human beings busy themselves in the vortex of the world and find their pleasure. It will be difficult for men to understand the law of concatenation, of causes and effects, the suppression of samskaras, that is, ideas that one forms which depend upon ignorance, of what used to reveal to men that which I have discovered at the price of laborious efforts. Why should I do so? This doctrine cannot be understood by those fueled by desire and hatred. It is mysterious, deep, hidden from the vulgar mind. If I proclaim it and men are unable to understand it, the only result will be fatigue and annoyance for me. There are beings whose spiritual highs are hardly darkened by light dusts. These will understand the doctrine. After investigation, believe that which you have yourselves tested and found reasonable, and which is for your good and that of others. Dresden James says, when a well-packaged web of lies has been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth will seem utterly preposterous and its speaker a raving lunatic. And George Orwell, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And if the truth is that ugly, which it is, then we do have to be careful about the way that we tell the truth. We serve no one by withholding information. We do not serve ourselves by refusing to investigate. A lack of information never assisted anyone. We do not serve ourselves by refusing any kind of information. Accurate information allows us options. We can choose to take action based upon it or choose to ignore it. But not knowing does not assist us. So put aside your preconceived notions, your psychological defense mechanisms, and your prejudices. Take a chance on remembering what could well grant you complete economic, emotional, and spiritual freedom. I have used in this particular work abbreviations for nouns such as the alphabet agencies of the governments of the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and some other parts of the world. And if I begin using what the dollar sign and the pound sign are commonly known as money, money itself is something of intrinsic value, no longer existed since 1933. More on that later. Now, the IRS/CRA/HMRC, these are the Internal Revenue Service, Canada Revenue Agencies, and Majesty's Revenue and Customs. FRB, BC, BOE, we got the Federal Reserve Bank, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, the Prudential Regulation Authority, FRN, BCN, RM, the Federal Reserve Notes, so Bank of Canada Notes, the Royal Mints, that prints pound sterling. Now we have USD, CAD, PS, which is US dollars, Canadian dollars, pound sterling. And you have the USA/CA, the corporations of the United States of America and Canada. Then you have the USG, which is the private foreign belligerent corporation masquerading itself as the United States/American government. CAG, private foreign belligerent corporation masquerading itself as the Canadian government. CAN/AM, Canada, America, the people and or the territory of the provinces of the United States. Or the people and of the territories of the provinces as well as the United States. UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, Rules for Commercial Contract Law, the only law in operation today. UCCI or UCC1, Financing Statement filed in the USA. PPSA, Personal Property Security Agreement, which is the financing statement filed in Canada. EFT, Electronic Funds Transfer, IMF, the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, Vatican, Crown, Private Section of London, England. PTB, Powers That Be, Zionists, Illuminati, Mason, Matrix, Global Elite, NWO, New World Order, International Bankers, Now we have SSN/SIN/NI, Social Security number, Social Insurance number, National Insurance number. SS/CPUC, Social Security, Canada Pension, Universal Credit. BAR, British Accreditation Registry. Regency, the agency which grants attorneys a bar card, not to be confused with the license to practice law. Banksters, public entities / government agencies / bureaucrats which confiscate funds, properties, assets of the people to collect the interest on the debts due to the involuntary bankruptcy of the United States and Canada for the purpose of total control of the people of the world. Intuition, your higher self, Holy Spirit, oneness, angels, deities, consciousness, universal intelligence, God's knowing, your collective unconscious, the spiritual middleman between the Creator and yourself. You know, there is no law compelling you to pay tax on your income. As for credit cards, debts, I would be happy to pay any financial obligation I might lawfully hold as soon as I receive these 3 documents. Validation of the credits, validation of the debts, which is of course the actual accounting. Number 2, verification of their claim against me, a sworn affidavit or even just a signed invoice. And number 3, a copy of the contract binding both parties. The banks can't validate the debt because they never sustained the loss. They can't verify any claim against me because I am not the capital NAME they are billing. More on this later. They can't produce a copy of the contract because one doesn't exist. What exists is an unenforceable unilateral contract, what the bankers refer to as your contract with us in quote. It is not a valid bilateral agreement since the 4 requirements of a lawful binding contract were not met on the credit card application. Namely, number 1, full disclosure. We are not told that we are creating a credit with our signature. Number 2, equal consideration. They bring nothing to the table and they have nothing to lose. Number 3, lawful terms and conditions. They are based upon fraud. And number 4, signatures of the parties. Meeting of the minds. Corporations can't sign because they have no right or mind to contract as their legal fictions. Credit cards are win-win for banks and lose-lose for everyone else. It is the slickest con game on the planet. Contract law is the only law. There is no constitutional law, Bill of Rights, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, no codes, rules, regulations, ordinances, statutes, bylaws, or anything else which most people think as law, which applies to free sovereign people. They all apply only to corporate entities. There is only one law which applies to us, the law which protects the life, liberty, rights, and property of all living souls. That which causes us to think that all these laws apply to us is the contracts, agreements we have made, either wittily or unwittingly. If there is no contract, there is no case. Contract is the law. Contractual financial liability is all that matters, and it must be proven. For those interested in education, I suggest you read John Tyler Gatto, and in particular the underground history of American education. Schooling is a huge waste of time, talent, energy, and creativity. There is a little to learn that school offers until we're out doing what we want to be doing. Apprenticeships, for instance, works, which is why the powers that be don't want that anymore. Apprenticing, they don't want to apprentice anyone anymore. They want us in government operated schools to waste our lives learning what no one wants to learn and what no one needs to know. The entire concept of life is that an individual learns as it goes. Schooling is an anathema to its natural concepts. Gather round, children allowed to take responsibility and given a serious part in the larger world are always superior to those merely permitted to play and be passive. At the age of 12, Admiral Farragut got his first command. I was in the 5th grade when I learned of this. Had Farragut gone to my school, it would have been in 7th. It seems the purpose of the so-called educational system is not to educate the individual to be free-thinking natural beings, but rather to distort what is really going on in the world and also convince us that we will be happy if we just get a good education. In order to get a good job, in order to make a lot of money, in order to buy as many worthless items as possible, and thereby become dependent upon them, in order to create as much debt as possible, thereby enslaving us all on counts. Programming, slave labor, debt, addiction, and ultimate confiscation of property, the first plank of the Communist Manifesto. There is no authority outside oneself. I am my own authority. Teachers are part of the agenda which programs kids into believing that someone else knows what's best for them. There is no limit to the agencies, professionals, and bureaucrats which exist solely to dictate how we ought to live our lives. Teachers, doctors, governments, ministers, and bankers spend time, funds, and effort intending to convince children what to think. I determined that my children would think for themselves. Children think their parents are perfect, so use these and be an example. As soon as we go to an authority, doctor, teacher, minister, we lose our power. The child wants to think of us as omnipotent since he knows he can become that if we are. I read that J.P. Morgan had said, I don't want a lawyer to tell me what I cannot do. I hire an attorney to tell me how to do what I want to do. The best thing about having children is finally getting to understand why we all felt neglected by our parents. We have, as they did, lives to lead. And we have children, and with the children, we're only just a part of this life. As children, we presumed we were the entire purpose in life. Feeling the neglect was painful only because we blamed our lack of worth for any inattention. And when we have our own children and realize that as much as we love our children, they still are not our entire lives, although for a while we are theirs. It allows us to see it wasn't our lack of worth which kept our parents from focusing on us 100% of the time. It was that they had a life of which they were only a part. All the property of this country now belongs to the state and will be used for the good of the state. FDR in 1933. Canada, for instance, is the 13th Federal Reserve District, the 12 being Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richmond, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Dallas, and San Francisco. Both the USA/Canada, the corporations are subject to the jurisdiction of the Crown/Vatican. In 1993, in Canada, for instance, Bill C-124 was passed, which states approximately In order to pay the national debts as if they were any national debts, the government might require or might be required and now has the legislation in place to confiscate the pensions, the RRSPs, investments, properties, and all other tangible assets of the people. The government is to confiscate your property under the guise of your having lost it. You couldn't pay your debts. Unfortunately, most people have fallen for this, and most will continue to do so until they have nothing left. David Icke once said, "There is nothing to fear about the imminent collapse of the global financial prison." If the Inland Revenue sends you a bill for a tax they thought you owed, do not take counsel from your fears. You can challenge the Inland Revenue. You will notice that they cannot support their claim. You may also notice that the amount they claim you owed can rise dramatically with each letter, and for no apparent reason other than they added penalties, late fees, interests, etc. The higher the amount, the clearer their scheme becomes. You may also notice that every letter comes not only from a different entity, but also with no signature, thereby rendering it an invalid document, an invalid commercial instrument. All invoices, in order to be valid, must be signed by someone able to bind the corporation in contract. And we are not lawfully bound to pay anything which is unsigned. Think of all the statements you receive which reads, in quotes, amount due, yet have no clout as they are incomplete. Anyone with a brain can see that this is what blows their cover. If they sent a bill of £2,000, one might be inclined to pay it. But a bill for £23,000 when one earns only £30,000 is simply laughable. IRS agents now openly admit that they have what is termed, quote, fishing expeditions, whereby they send out a few million notice of assessments just to see who bites. The amount is not enough to create so much angst as to get questioned on it, yet enough to make it worth their while. Most people will figure that a £2,000 bill from the Inland Revenue is not worth fighting and going to jail over, so they pay it. If the bill were £25,000, all hell will break loose. Imagine £2,000 from several millions on questioning taxpayers. That's a lot of money. Yet, as David Icke says, those at the top of the pyramid are the manipulators of human consciousness. They are sentient program with no soul. So there is no one iota of divine intervention at the IRS, CRA, HMRC. Rather, this is a case of four things. Number one, they are desperate. Number two, they are surreptitious. Number three, they get a percentage of the sterling dollars, Canadian dollars they recover. Number four, they require our fare in order to stay alive. They want us to be fearful in order for them to stay alive. And they think the extortive total amount owing frightens us, when in fact it is laughable. The bank's own published manual claims money does not have to be issued by the government or be in any special form. Money is anything that can be sold for cash and which the banks accepts as money. When you purchase something from a shop and you return it, why are they so intent on getting back your receipt? No, not to prove you paid for it, because you can't pay for anything. The receipt is the evidence of exchange. The goods don't matter any more than the principal on a loan matters. All they want is the interest. Look at your minimum payment due on your credit card statement. It is the only interest. The loan doesn't exist. They must pay the IMF, the interest on the loan. More of this later. Now, we're going to talk about this book, Modern Money Mechanics, the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And it goes as this. The actual process of money creation takes place primarily in banks. Bankers discovered that they could make loans merely by giving their promise to pay or bank notes to borrowers. In this way, banks began to create money. Transaction deposits are the modern counterpart of banknotes. It was a small step from printing notes to making book entries, crediting deposits of borrowers, which the borrowers in turn could spend by writing checks, thereby printing their own money. How money is borrowed into existence. It does not exist until someone borrows it. It is debt-based money. Hence, it is not really money, since money is based upon substance, gold, silver, etc. If money is borrowed into existence, then this is all that exists. So where is the interest? It doesn't exist. How can it possibly be paid? It can't be paid because it's not a part of what is created. It simply does not exist. The currency we use is based upon our future labor, which the feds have promised to the banksters. It also does not yet exist. Future generations are already enslaved to pay your debts, which does not exist. We can't pay debts with something of no substance. We also need to take a look at how the account statements were created. Goods and services are a sign of value. Everything is only true because someone says so and someone else agrees to it. Do you ever question your bills, which are not true bills in commerce, but rather statements of accounts? Not the amount due in quote, but the concept. When it comes to vehicle registration and insurance, I know the difference between registration and recording. I am capable of sending the Secretary for Transport. I use the ministers of the government of the United Kingdom to work for me. I could send them a proposal of contract, the terms and conditions of which are that we agree that what I have put on my license plate will identify my vehicle as not one of theirs. It is mine. Also, I agree to carry with me a form of identification which I created in case there is an incident whereby they require to know who is involved. I enclose the surety bond as security to settle any claim of liability in the event of an incident requiring compensation from another living soul. I send a copy to the local police station. If I am asked about proof of insurance, I can honestly respond by providing evidence that I have posted £1 million bond. Simply write a check of £1 million and send it to the chief constable, please. When it comes to licensing, the only one who requires a driver license is one who is operating a commerce. So unless you are driving for hire, i.e. driving in commerce, you are not required to have one. If the law ever stops an individual to ask if they can see the driver's license, the best way to reply would be, why would I want one of those? The driver and vehicle licensing agency in the United Kingdom will be very accommodating to accept an international driver's license, which can come from anywhere. All they pretend to do is to show that they have interest in the